In this video, I'm going to show you how to build a titmouse house. Now, I'm filming this for my father who lives out east. He moved out of Wisconsin a couple years back, so I think I'd like to give him a little bit of a project for Christmas, is where I'm mailing this to. So I have all these pieces cut out. So this video, I'm going to be cutting out two sets. One, which I will show how to assemble, which is part for my father to watch, how to assemble the titmouse house, and the rest of the video will be on the cutting out the pieces. This is a pretty small house overall. You could probably easily cut all this out of a 1x6 or 1x8 that's 8 foot long pine board. This house stands at about width, counting the roof, about 9.5 inches in width, and we're looking at about 11 inches in height, not counting the bracket on the back here. So again, this is all built out of pine. The plans come from the book How to Attract, House, and Feed Birds by Walter Schultz. I found this book at a thrift store forever ago, and it is from the 70s, so the plans are pretty fast and loose on here, but I'll go through and describe the best and hopefully add in a cut list to the description of the video. The hardest part of this will be figuring out these curves, the curves on the house. I'd say you can just follow along with it how I described in the video, or you can cut out whichever you want, or you can just make it a straight slant. I don't think the titmouse birds are going to mind too much either way. So we'll get started on this and we'll get showing how to build the house.
This house was really quick and pretty easy to make. So I had 4-inch stock here already pre-cut from the previous houses, and I'm just cutting down the sides, or the fronts there for that one. Then I gotta make my rip cuts for the sides and for the roof. Now the side pieces are gonna be about 9 inches in height and 6 3/4 inches wide. And those are the side pieces we're gonna cut off the waves on later. I'll put the plans in the description below, but overall the front is 4 inches in width and 10.5 inches high. The sides are both 9 inches high by 6 3/4. The bottoms are 4x4, and the roof pieces are 5.5 by 7 1/4. Last piece to cut here will be mounting brackets. These are about 18 inches long by 1.5 inches in width.
Cut list on this is pretty simple, pretty straightforward house here. So again, I got two sets as I'm sending off a set out to the East Coast, and I'm doing a set here to assemble here for the video. So it's two side pieces, which will cut out some wavelength looking deals into it. That we'll do that in a second. We got our bottom piece, which is 4x4, pretty simple 4-inch by 4-inch square. We have our front and back. So overall, it's gonna be a pretty small house. It's gonna fit within the 4 square. Or 2 roof pieces, and then a bracket brace for mounting on the back. So we're gonna go to the next step, which is gonna be cutting out the waves on our side pieces.
These parts here were too difficult for one mortal human or one person who never paid attention in geometry class. I think I made it way more complicated than it needed to be. Understanding radians and whatnot is not my strong suit. But I actually explained ahead here. I was able to kind of figure it out pretty well, but you can really just kind of do whatever you want, but I'll put the plans as well in the description below on how to make these measurements.
Okay, so after a lot of scribbles and quite a bit of help from the wife, I think we figured this out. I am by no means any sort of mathematician or that good at math in general. So what we figured out was that these waves have about a 7/8 inch radian. After a whole lot more Google and a whole lot more asking the wife, we kind of figured this out. So how this goes is, if you have a compass, this works a whole lot easier than what we did. We ended up finding a bottle with a diameter of 1 3/4 inch, which is of course children's Benadryl, our favorite thing. And we had our first line going from the very top at the 6 3/4 mark all the way down to our 5 3/4 mark here at the end where it's supposed to taper off to. And from here, we had another 5/8 inch line behind this first one. It's lined up all the way, and we had to keep our waves or our curves within those two lines using the bottle. So after a whole lot of trial and error, we were able to kind of line it up, each bottle going alternating while staying between the lines and marking each one until we achieved something that looked pretty darn close to what the book has. So we got these curved out. I'm going to cut this out in the bandsaw. I'll probably make a template for myself for future use, but and I'll use this as a template for the rest of these side pieces. The perch is going to go somewhere within the middle here, but we'll figure that out later on. From here on out, it's pretty smooth sailing. I just ended up cutting up those waves on the side pieces, and then I ended up taking them over to the spindle sander and just smooth that out every time there. So the perch bracket, when we get to that, there's not really a great spot to put it that it tells you there in the book, but you want to put it kind of more towards, I would say, the front or the crest of that second wave on there, just to make sure your front doesn't block it, your front piece. Now the table saw here, you want to set your table saw to 30 degrees to make that 60-degree bevel. So that's just what I'm doing here. Set that table saw, cutting off those bevels for those roof angles right along the side that's 7 1/4 inches long. It's where I'm ripping it along. Next is cutting the roof angles on your front and your back pieces here. So this is again another 60-degree angle here. So I mark in the centers on each of these just to know where to line up my miter saw so I can make those cuts. So pretty easy, line them up. And I'm getting this one, I'm making 4 different birdhouses, or 2 different birdhouses. So I'm cutting 4 pieces here. One set for a kit for my father I'm seeing after Christmas, and one to assemble for this video. Then it's on to drilling out the hole for the bird, so the bird can get into the house. This measurement is 8.5 inches up from the bottom of the birdhouse, so 8.5 inches up is the center. Then you're going to center on the board, and then the hole size itself is 1.5 inches. So I just use an 1.5 inch Forstner bit to cut both of those out for the houses. And finally here, just cutting out the curves on these mounting brackets. Again, using the Children's Benadryl, so I had in hand. Curves fit pretty nicely. So just mark those out for both houses. Cut those out in the bandsaw, and then sanded it down on my belt sander to round those off. So after sanding out the brackets, last thing to do is to drill out that hole for the dowel for the perch. Hole is a 1/4 inch hole, so you have a 1/4 inch dowel with that. Not really a clear place of where to put this, so I put it kind of close to the front of that second wave, which makes sure that that front can really cover it up. Now we should be ready to assemble. For the most part, I'm going to use these galvanized nails, just because it's what I have on hand, left over in the garage. You use screws. If you do screws, I would pre-drill by the vast majority of your holes, because I'm sure things will tend to crack on you if you don't. Crack and split. So, now we got our front and our back piece. We got our 2 roofs, which will fit together nicely. Our bottom piece, our 2 sides, and our bracket for the back there as well. So, as the book says, nail together the stock for the front and back pieces. So, remember to do all along the edges of here. So, setting it all up, you kind of look at building it around that bottom base there. Our roofs, we're going to go pretty self-explanatory right on top. From there, we will have our house. So, on here I ended up doing the bracket last, so I took that away and decided to nail it at the end, just because those nails wouldn't poke all the way through the house. And it's just the easiest way to do it. On each of the butt joints there, I put 3 nails in for each of those joints. I'm sure you could do more or less, whatever you felt would be appropriate. So pre-nailing the sides here, nail it on to that back, both of those, and then I will work to line these up with putting the bottom back in so I can line up that front piece so everything is the right distance apart. And again, 3 nails in on that front piece as I get that bottom in there. Carefully get that in there. And everything lined up nice and snug. Actually, with this, it's pretty easy once you get together. Used a clamp to make sure everything stayed stable while I got those first couple nails in there. And I popped that clamp off to get those last couple nails on there. Put it on the roof. I did 2 nails on each end of the roof here, so 2 on the front and 2 on the back for each of those pieces there. Held that pretty secure all together.
I definitely missed in some of my nail tabs here and ended up popping through the wood, so I had to rip all that off and tap those nails back on, which was a bit of a pain. But obviously, if nails poking out the front there, it's probably not going to be too friendly for the birds to want to use it. So just doing a little bit of redoing on that both times. I must have messed up a bit on the roof here, but just pulling those out, relining it back up so they're flush with the back. Bottom piece calls for a round over at the back end of it to help it with that swing out action. So with my trim router here, I just threw on a 1/4 inch round over edge there and routed both of those back ends to have a nice little rounded area there. Popping that in, I decided to go with screws on this part to help with that swing out. So pre-drilled the holes here to be able to pop those screws in and assemble it to the back. I did pop in a screw to the center of that bottom piece. One has a little bit of a handle. You can probably switch that out the knob if you wanted to, but also just to help kind of hold that in place was a pretty nifty little thing to be able to just hold on to while I drilled these holes in.
Alright, now do a little bit of cleanup. Fits nicely. Well, we're going to put a screw in there as well. And then we're going to mount our back on.
I'm just popping a small little screw here to the front. Again, doing pre-drilling beforehand. That way I can easily back that screw out when I want to pull that bottom off to clean out the birdhouse.
Now hold your bottom in. So I'm sure you put a little knob and something at the bottom to make it a little easier to clean up, but now that is pretty darn sturdy. So flip it on the back. Nail this guy in. Remember these nails. It'll work for the birds. So obviously not 100% centered there, but it's on there. The last thing is our little dowel piece. And the dowel length is a 9-inch, 1/4-inch dowel that should fit right through our holes here that we created. Okay, your dowel, go right through your hole. Should fit comfortably. Yeah, I want some glue to that. Keep it fit just like that. In there, you have your titmouse house.